Chu Feng wasn't really from the Chu family. He was an adopted son by Chu Yuan, the fifth oldest in the Chu family. That caused Chu Feng to be pushed aside and to be humiliated at a small age. If it wasn't for Chu Yuan's protection, he would have already been kicked out of the Chu family. Because of that, Chu Feng was very thankful towards Chu Yuan and swore to become the pride of Chu Yuan and to win back some honor. 5 years ago, Chu Feng was exactly 10 years old, and it was the best age to train in the martial arts. The him at that time had many expectations for training because he felt that the time to prove himself had arrived. However, he never would have thought after entering the Azure Dragon School for 1 month, lightning would strike his body and enter his dantian. At first, Chu Feng even thought it was good luck because when he started training, his speed of improvement was astonishing. In 2 short months, he arrived at the 2nd level of the spirit realm. That speed was completely abnormal, and because of that, Chu Feng didn't dare to tell it to anyone, so he hid his strength and continued training. But the good scene did not last long. Just as Chu Feng thought he became a genius, change happened within his body. Because of that change, it made it so his cultivation stopped and did not move forward, and he was labeled to have the most horrible talent of a lifetime, disease. At that time, the Saint Spirit grass in Chu Feng's hands was being refined and absorbed by his dantian. His refining speed was extremely fast, and it exceeded common sense. Normally, with Chu Feng's strength, it would take at least 1 month to refine the Saint Spirit grass. However, looking at it now, it was already halfway refined just after a short while, and Chu Feng's dantian that felt like a never-ending cave also had a feeling of being full. But suddenly, light floated over Chu Feng's hand, and the other half of the Saint Spirit grass instantly disappeared. Also, at the same time, everything changed in Chu Feng's dantian. The 9 lightning beasts interwove with each other. It was hurriedly moving and it was actually condensing. Finally, it turned into a pill-like object. After the pill formed itself, endless spiritual energy surged out from it like a tide washing Chu Feng's body. Very soonly, it permeated through his entire body. Whoosh! Chu Feng suddenly opened his eyes, and there were traces of lightning in them. An indescribable expression hung on his face. I succeeded. After 5 years, I finally succeeded. Chu Feng was incomparably joyful. He jumped down from the bed, and as he walked around, he sized up his body. In the journey of martial cultivation, the known realms were the following: Spirit, Origin, Profound, and Heaven. Those were the 4 big realms, and every realm was divided into 9 levels. The first level of the Spirit realm. The main point of it was to train the physical body with special methods and to increase strength. But after reaching the 2nd level of the Spirit realm, one must use ways to condense spiritual energy. Only people who successfully condensed their spiritual energy in their dantian could truly start their path in martial cultivation. Chu Feng's body changed, and it made it unable to condense spiritual energy. The divine lightning in his dantian were like 9 hungry wild beasts. The spiritual energy that Chu Feng condensed would always be engulfed by that divine lightning. But he didn't give up. It was because he found out that although the divine lightning did engulf his spiritual energy, there was a limit. As long as he kept on providing spiritual energy towards his dantian, he could fill it up one day. And today, he finally succeeded. This is a really strong feeling. Endless amounts of spiritual energy is surging into my body, as though it was going to break through my body. This feeling was inconceivable to Chu Feng. He never would have thought that the divine lightning would directly condense into a pill and occupy a place in the dantian. The spiritual energy that the divine lightning was giving off was very dense, and it was beyond imagination. He knew that even with his 5 years of non-stop cultivation, he could not condense such strong spiritual energy. The reason why he could was because of that divine lightning. buzz. But just at that time, Chu Feng's body suddenly became stiff, and his expression also changed greatly. The divine lightning was changing. His power instantly increased by several times, and he suddenly broke through again and stepped into the 4th level of the spirit realm. Have the hard times stopped and the good times come? Chu Feng tightly clenched his fist, and he felt that the explosive power in his body was worth his 5 years of suffering. Suddenly, continuously breaking through 2 levels, the unexplainable method of becoming strong finally returned. He used a severe gaze to look towards the direction of the inner court and muttered, "Chu Zhen, I'll be taking your Saint Spirit grass." The Azure Dragon School's disciple recruitment only happened once a year, and every time it lasted for 10 days. After 10 days, the annual Inner Disciple exam would start. This time, Chu Feng, who had been silent for 5 years, would also participate. The exam location was a huge underground palace. Within the main hall of the underground palace, the number of people were like oceans and mountains, and there were most likely over 10,000 people. Most of the people there were at the 3rd level of the spirit realm because everyone knew that the Inner Disciple exam required one to be at least in the 3rd level to pass. However, there was also a small portion of disciples at the 2nd level, and they wanted to try to pass it within the confusion. There were people like that every year, but most of them ended with failures. The thing worth mentioning, though, was that there were also a small portion of 4th levels there. They were not mediocre people who trained slow, and in fact, some of them were even geniuses. They intentionally waited until they were at the 4th level of the spirit realm before participating in the Inner Disciple exam. The reason? For the reward. When one reached the 3rd level, they could start training martial skills. Martial skills were very strong attacking methods. Not only could they thoroughly display strength, they could also make people gain power that exceeded the limits of their body. Because of that, martial skills were very precious, and even the rich and powerful families that has been existing for generations didn't have them. That was the reason why all sorts of families had to send their young generations into various schools for cultivation. In every school, there were a large amount of martial skills, and within the Azure Dragon School, as long as you become an inner court disciple, you could start cultivating the martial skills. Martial skills were also divided into ranks, and from the weakest to the strongest, there were 9 ranks. Within the inner court, the best martial skill book was only a rank 3-1. But within the annual Inner Disciple exam, the first person to pass it would get a rank 4 martial skill book. That was why those people would rather train in the outer court and not enter the inner court. It was for the rank 4 martial skill book. Look, isn't that Yang Tianyu? Wow, it really is him. He's already at the 4th level of the spirit rank by the age of 13. It seems like first place in this exam will be him. In the ocean of people, one young man grabbed people's attention. To be more precise, it was a boy. There were dozens of thousands of disciples in the outer court, and most of them were unknown characters. However, the focal figures that people paid attention to were mostly geniuses, in which this Yang Tianyu was one of them. That may not be so. No matter how much aptitude Yang Tianyu has, he is, at the end, a child. It would be very hard for him to get first. There are many unknown talents in Azure Dragon School, and sometimes geniuses may not be able to beat the mediocre. For example, that Duan Yuxuan, another outer court disciple, pointed with his fingers at a cold young man. That person was called Duan Yuxuan. He has been in the Azure Dragon School for 6 years, and he was also originally an unknown character. But a few months ago, he unexpectedly defeated an inner disciple who was in the 4th level of the spirit realm. Because of that, his name was widespread, and he became the focal character of the outer court. Silence. Suddenly, a loud and clear sound echoed. Looking at the source, everyone couldn't help but stare blankly. They saw a dozen or so silhouettes appear on the high platform in the hall. Most of them were aged old people, and they were the outer court elders. But not only was the leader young, she was even a beautiful female. The female was wearing a red skin-tight dress, and it outlined her alluring curves. Especially under the dress, there were two straight, snow-white legs, and it could be said that they were perfect. Not only was her body attractive, her appearance was also extremely lovely. With round eyes, red lips, and an oval face, it was just like a fox face. She was the famous beauty elder of Asura Dragon School, Su-Ro. Su-Ro was a top-class character. She entered the Asura Dragon School at the age of 10, entered the inner court at the age of 12, and became a core disciple